Pope Francis is not ashamed to say he wants a church which is poor and for the poor. In this exhortation, Pope Francis sets aside the agenda and casts and charts a path forward for tonight's discussion and for the Church's continuing solidarity with those who are poor and vulnerable. The Holy Father, in writing this encyclical, has put in not just words, but also his life. It's his heart's in here. This will be one of the great documents of his papacy, as so many of the Holy Fathers are remembered for one special document or one special thing. Many of us think, although this is a young pontificate, and this Pope will do many wonderful things in the future years, but many of us think that this is going to be one of the centerpieces of his preaching and of his doctrine. From the moment of his election, in his choice of the name Francis, in what he says and what he does, the Holy Father places solidarity with the poor and the vulnerable at the heart of his leadership. In his visit to Lampedusa, the Isle of Tears for so many migrants there in the Mediterranean, to the favelas of Rio, to Assisi, and to his stunning everyday outreach to the disabled and the disfigured, Francis shows us the way. He mirrors Jesus in his compassion. He exemplifies what the Church preaches about priority for the poor and the imperative justice. He doesn't just reach out to the poor, is this a great mass, a great mob, a great measure of people, but to individuals who are poor, brothers and sisters, touching them and loving them as children of God and members of our one Christian family. And he doesn't fit into a category, this Holy Father. He's a category of his own. He's a prophet who sees the world as it is and has the courage to make it better.
Not to share one's wealth with the poor is to steal from them and to take away their livelihood. It is not our own goods which we hold, but theirs. Wow. That raises enormous questions about private property versus the dominion of God over all creation and our stewardship of the earth's goods and the universal destination of goods. We have an enormous amount there to think about.
I love a pope who takes a stand against sourpusses. I actually think that's no accident. I mean, I think that infuses his whole ministry. I also have to say that he is the only pope who has ever made a moral case against political pundits. Indeed, he's made a case against appearing ever on a panel. I don't know if many of you remember. It's true, I had to search my conscience. In the American Review, some of you may remember, the Pope said, if one has the answers to all the questions, that is proof that God is not with that person. And so I don't think we can ever do any panels again under that.
You were in a lot of trouble. I promise you did.
But to humbly answer your question, John, I think there are a couple of key things that do make him different, because I don't think we should pretend that he is getting all this attention, he has created all this energy, he has become a cool pope. Can you imagine being that age and being cool? Only Cardinal McCarrick pulls that off. And the reason is there is something different here. I think there are three things. One is there is a radicalism and an urgency to what he is saying. And you read the language of this latest document in so many places. You know, he talks about a deified market. He talks about a system which tends to devour everything, which stands in the way of increased profits. He talks about defenseless beings. And so I think that we cannot deny that he has given a higher priority to the Church's social teaching, to our obligations to the poor, and to criticism of an unjust economy than we have heard in a long time. Not that he is inconsistent with John Paul or Benedict, because they said some tough things about the market as well. But I think this is so central to who he is.
The line that really struck me when he talks about this personalism is the need to remove our sandals before the sacred ground of the other. And that is an extraordinary statement about when we encounter other human beings, that we're encountering the sacred in our own lives. And that is, I think that that's a wonderful statement. I'll say, we don't say this much in Washington, but I'll say it anyway, because I don't mind. John and I have been misfits in some very distinguished company. Republicans and Democrats who don't get some of these issues. But I would say that at the heart, that for all of this discussion, the reason that Francis is powerful and attractive to so many is because he talks about Jesus and because he acts like Jesus. And that is the source of power and authority in the Christian church, in all of its expressions. It's what's drawn so many Catholics back to this faith. It's what attracts so many people outside the faith to this Pope. And I would only conclude by saying that a church that looked like this would transform the entire world.
Frequently when Catholics and when the Bishops' Conference it winds up inserted in a political debate, whether they took the lead or they were brought into a news story for issues for purposes of convenience or legitimate ones, people don't see it outside their ideological lens, right? In our news cycle lens, they don't get where the credibility is coming from, where the authority is coming from. We don't do a good enough job about talking, the church, Catholics, about the social services that are provided, and not just as a mere political debate, but the actual lives. And so when Cardinal Dolan or whomever it is talking about immigration, they're just hearing, so many people are processing it as, he doesn't agree with me today, or, he's just being a liberal on this, or whatever it is. But the church is actually speaking from experience and authority, and if we see it in that lens rather than the impoverished political lens we often look at things, I think that changes it, and it has to do with, I think it just goes back to, again, everything that Pope Francis is modeling. If we're actually living Christian lives, then we actually have something to bring to the table. We're not just people talking.
I think the message here is one of clarity. The measure of a society is how we treat the least of these, and all of us have an obligation to be a part of those choices, those decisions, and those relationships. And it is just amazing to me to turn on the Sunday morning talk shows and hear the debate about income inequality in America. And it wasn't the Census Bureau that made that happen. It was an apostolic exhortation from the Roman Catholic Church.